Picture this, you're in your yearly review meeting with your boss at work. You're up for promotion and you know it, you've been killing it at work lately. The conversation's going quite well, but promotion hasn't come up. The time is coming when you have to speak up and mention promotion. The time comes and you say nothing. Or imagine this, you're in a fairly toxic work environment. You've managed to stick it out for a while, but it's not great. To make it worse, you just found out that you're making significantly less money than someone else in the same role at the same organization. What do? Do you stand up for yourself? Do you ask for more money? Even though it could put your job at risk, and who can risk losing a job today anyway? This week we're talking about career, advocating for yourself, not advocating for yourself, what happens when it goes well and what happens when it doesn't. Today's guest is unique because she joins us from the entertainment industry, an industry which was thought of as glittering, paid with money, but it's apparent now that all that glitters is not gold. What happens when you're a really public person in a very public industry and you're being treated like crap, especially in an industry known for rejection? Do you stand up for yourself? Who advocates for you? Do you advocate for yourself? Are your lawyers supposed to advocate for you? And then what happens if you decide to have children? Is parental leave even a thing in the entertainment industry? Throw in pregnancy, having children, not to mention parenting during a pandemic, and we have ourselves one very interesting conversation. This episode does include conversation around miscarriage, so as always, look after yourself. If it'll be triggering for you, just skip this one. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everyone, to Between Us, the interview show that is breaking down taboo topics to build connection. And I'm your host, Nicole. I am just ecstatic about today's guest. You may have seen her on your screens as Jenny from Workin Mums. She is an actor, she's a realtor, she is mother to a really cute little boy. She is an Instagram treasure, if I may say so. She's joining us from Tennessee. Welcome to the show, Jessalyn Wanlim.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, so excited. We have so much to get through and all the things to discuss. You're in Tennessee, right? So how's that? How long have you been there?
So we moved in the middle of the pandemic in May of last year. We didn't tell anybody. Literally said bye to a handful of people in LA, packed up and just escaped because we didn't know what was going to happen in LA. And we were freaking out that with all of the craziness of the pandemic, there was going to be a riot eventually. So we were fortunate enough to make that decision. And it looks like a lot of Californians joined us in Nashville.
We did something super similar, actually. My husband's parents live in Idaho. And when I was 3 weeks postpartum, we were in Oakland in California and we were like, something's going to go down. It didn't in the end, but we didn't know that. I mean, I had given birth literally 3 weeks before. We packed up everything and drove 2 days. My C-section scars had barely healed. It was nuts. It was absolutely crazy. And I actually did want to talk to you about, something that's very new for us. I mean, you gave birth in January of 2020. I gave birth in February. We became mothers during the pandemic. I think there's been some amazing highs and then some lows as well. So I wanted to talk about that. Let's get the lows out of the way. I'd say one thing for me, it was so new. We didn't know anything. We didn't know anything about the pandemic. We didn't know anything about this crazy disease that was going around. You have these tiny humans that are already super vulnerable, but then there's a deathly disease outside. I mean, that for me was one of the hardest things.
Yeah. I mean, so my low was not necessarily knowing that I actually had COVID in March. The only reason I kind of had an idea that something was wrong during that time was, do you know the nose Frida snot sucker?
Very familiar. Used it yesterday, unfortunately.
So when I was sucking up his snot, inhaling was so intense and laborious. So I was like, there's something weird going on here. So I couldn't not take care of him because I didn't know. And I couldn't taste, I couldn't smell for almost 2 weeks. And then before we left for Nashville, I got tested for the antibodies and it tested positive. And even the doctor was so confused saying, are you sure you didn't have it? I'm like, I have no idea. But thinking back, I had all of these weird symptoms. So I went out once to get groceries and 100% that must have been the only time that I was ever exposed to it. And here we are.
Usually when you imagine having a baby, you kind of think about people being around you or like coming to visit and like holding your baby and all of that stuff. And it was so weird because everyone was just in self-preservation mode. I'm so grateful that I had some really amazing people who did like drop off food and stuff, but it was still so, like the nerves.
I know. The fact that there was no sense of help outside of you and your partner, like if you're fortunate enough to have a partner in this, like it was hard.
Okay, one more crappy thing, and that is that there was no, like the internet had not caught up to our situation. Like I remember Googling about like how to go back to work, like go back, how to end maternity leave, go back to work during COVID. There was nothing. And I'm a child of the internet, right? So like I look to the internet for basically everything. The internet hadn't caught up. Like the internet had no opinions on what to do as a mother going back to work during COVID. Now there's stuff out there, but I think that really hit home for me. This is a completely new thing, that there's no opinions out there yet.
Where I was from in Canada, you get a year's maternity leave. So you're still with your child anyway. But like obviously in the US, you maybe get 3 months.
Yeah, I had 3.
Some people get 6 weeks and you're just like, how is this even possible and rational? But, women do it. And I'm just like, you guys are powerhouses. Like, I would never know how to juggle that during a pandemic. Like, no, thank you.
It's insane. Yeah, let's go on to the good things. I think one solid benefit is that we did not have to push with masks on. Like we did not have to go through labor with masks. You didn't have to have a mask in hospital, right? We missed that.
Because it was January and we had no idea. Like LA shut down in March, beginning of March. So yeah, there was none of that. I mean, we had maybe 2 months of freedom, but for the first 3 weeks, I couldn't walk anyway after giving birth. So, because my hips were all messed up. Feels like it was just yesterday.
In the weirdest of ways. And yet it's been a whole year.
It's just so devastating to see them grow up and not be surrounded by other children. What kind of effect is this going to have on them long term, if anything? But I think it's just more my mentality.
I think they'll be fine too. Like I have Googled far too much, but a lot of it says how typically, because we don't have decent maternity coverage in this country, a lot of kids will be thriving because they've had so much time with their mums and their dads, like more than ever, basically. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go with that. She's gonna be great. Is there anything that has surprised you? Like I want to talk to you like about your journey to motherhood in general, but is there anything that surprised you about being a mom?
How much like your energy is so important to bringing him back down, I think is like the most shocking thing for me. And it's the most challenging because I want to be at his level too. I want to scream and shout and be like, don't do that. Like, but every second that he throws his tantrums these days, I just have to take a couple deep breaths and try to assess the situation and figure out how to approach it. And it's never the same. Never. That's where I'm at.
Oh, seriously. I also feel like I'm surprised by how much there is to worry about. Like I was a pretty chill person. I'd still say I'm a pretty chill person now, but there was just so many things to think about and so many things to worry about. But I've had to know when the internet is my friend and when the internet is like a frenemy.
I think I actually stopped Googling when I gave birth because when I was pregnant, I was like, what happens with this? And like, it was just so crazy how things would pop up. Like, I'm not the first person to ask Google this dumb question, but then they had like silly, like true answers, which actually helped significantly. And I was like, you know what? This isn't going to be healthy for me. And when I was, raising him, like I had to stop with the internet because you can go down this really bad rabbit hole.
Yeah, I've been there. I lived there multiple times. I think like when I was trying to get pregnant, I was Googling all the time. And then when we were pregnant, I was like, I'm not, because I couldn't handle it. Like if I read the internet, I would be like, okay, she's not going to survive. Like there's no way, because everything online is just literally like everyone's dying.
Did you enjoy being pregnant?
No. The first 3 months were really hard. Like, I felt like crap. No one knows about it. Like you can't complain because you're not supposed to be telling people.
Right.
and you can't, it's not visible from the outside, but yet everything has changed. And
Yeah.
so I did not like the first like trimester. I threw up well into my 6th month. I loved my 3rd trimester. I felt super strong. I was working out. I wasn't throwing up anymore. I actually, yeah, I was kind of thriving. What about you?
I mean, the whole journey of pregnancy was it's just stressful for me because I had like two miscarriages prior to Cam. So, any moment where I was feeling a little off, especially in the first 3 months, I was like, well, I've been down this road and I can't say that it's going to continue on because in the past it hasn't proven so. So that was like my battle with being pregnant. So the first time I was actually filming season 4 of Working Moms.
Mm.
I think it was like during that Halloween recital with the kids and everything, and all of us were there, and I was like in this huge ball gown dress. I found out I was pregnant like a few weeks before that.
Mhm.
I was like talking to Juno and Danny because they were in the green room waiting with me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pregnant. And then like during that day, I started to spot and everything, and I was like, is this normal? And they're like, yeah, it's normal. And then I just had this weird pain,
Mm.
and I didn't miscarry per se on set because that would have been very tragic. Um, I mean, miscarrying is tragic in any regard, but like I guess when I flew back home, that's when everything happened at like midnight. But anyway, so that was like my first one. That was a shock just because I hadn't even seen my doctor for my first
Mm.
appointment. And then the second time it happened, we did the ultrasound and it came back as a blighted ovum because she couldn't find where the egg was. And there was no egg in the sac.
Mm.
So that was when I had to like either do a DNC or take the pill
Mm.
or let it come like, resolve itself naturally. And so I just waited because honestly, the DNC would have cost me about three to $4,000.
Wow.
The pill, my OBGYN wasn't authorized to prescribe the pill, and that was gonna be another $1,100. So she's like, "Do you wanna just wait it out?" And so we did, but it took, like, almost 3 weeks for
Um,
it to pass.
wow.
That was, like, the worst, is just waiting for something to get out of your body. Every woman has their, you know, really personal story, but those 2 are mine, and that's where that's where we're at.
When I was doing research, like 10 to 15% of us are experiencing miscarriages, but we don't talk about it to the point that when it happens, you kind of feel like no one else has ever been through this because you don't hear about it.
Yeah.
Why do you think that there's that whole taboo or like stigma around miscarrying, and why don't we talk about it more?
Well, I think everybody's reaction to it is like they feel uncomfortable. So whoever you're talking to, you're hoping you're in a safe space to actually share.
Hmm.
And, when I have shared with other women, they're like, "Me too, girl." And another woman of mine that I know of, she had 9 miscarriages
Oh, goodness gracious.
and couldn't have a child. We need to like do better as a community of not just women, but just everybody being able to talk about this because I think maybe a couple of my aunts or even my grandma, I don't know, like they probably had some too, and no one, we don't discuss it. I mean, Asians don't really discuss a lot of that stuff to begin with, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, no, it's so true. But I think what happens though as well is that it does happen so often, but then when it happens, you feel like you did something wrong. People are slowly starting to talk about it. You know, I think about Meghan Markle and Chrissy Teigen and just how open they've been with their stories. Like that, talking about it, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, we're discussing even trying to have a second child, but there's that fear
Yeah.
that I'm gonna have to endure that all over again. So I mean, is it worth it for me to try? Absolutely, but it's still like a stress factor, and I have to remember to just let it go because the 3rd time I got pregnant was the one time that I gave up that year. I was like, "That's it, I'm done," because I got pregnant fast in between both like, after my first miscarriage, I got pregnant pretty fast after the fact. And then I was like, that's it. We're good.
Yeah.
Can't handle another one this year. Didn't take any ovulating tests, none of that. Like, we weren't timing anything. I was just tracking when my period was, and that was it. And then I got pregnant, and I was like, well, there you go.
I mean, just in general, for me, there was so much anxiety being pregnant anyway, let alone on top of that, the fear of, like, am I going to have to go through this again? I guess you don't necessarily know when you're out of the woods, right? Like, there's no, like, time where it's like, okay, this is now fine. But what was the rest of your pregnancy like?
I don't remember. I just remember having the most pathetic cravings. All I wanted was like veggies and dip, like baby carrots, snap peas, celery. Like, it was the most pathetic cravings. Like, French fries made me sick. Like, I was nauseous just thinking about it. And otherwise, I was pregnant when I was filming. Season 4 was when I was pregnant. It was just hanging over my head the whole time. And I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
I barely, that's what it was. That's because I don't remember, because I was never functioning properly.
You just blacked out. It was like a 9-month blackout.
Yeah, I did not sleep. I think I slept maybe 4 hours collectively every night, just because I wasn't tired, just uncomfortable the whole time. Hated sitting, hated standing, hated doing everything.
What has it been like continuing to work with a baby and like into motherhood? And how does maternity leave and all of that stuff work specifically in the acting industry? I guess, of course, COVID has made it different, but what would it be typically, and what has your experience been with COVID-19?
So typically you're just unemployed until your next job is in the acting industry. So there was no difference really. I have this crazy story. Just because I was bored out of my mind in my 3rd trimester, I got this audition tape to audition to play a stripper. Okay. And I'm like, I am so bored, I'm going to do this. And
Wait, were you pregnant at the time?
I was pregnant.
Yes.
I sent the tape in. 2 hours later, my water broke. I am at the doctor's waiting to get induced, and my agent calls me. They're like, they kind of want you for this part. And I'm like, I don't know if this is smart. Like, I only did this just because I was bored and I was 38 weeks pregnant. And my agent's like, you know what, let's just pass. And then they called again. They're like, can she get on the stripper pole in 2 weeks? I was like, I don't think so.
Gonna be a no. It's gonna be a no. You're like, I can barely walk.
I guess when I was, postpartum, the auditions started because it's like during that time where pilot season starts for the acting world. And for all of you that don't know that, there's a lot of shows that writers get pitched to networks, and networks decide on what gets picked up to order to pilot, which is the first episode of a series that you see. And if it goes past that, then it gets picked up, order to series. So it was pilot season, and I couldn't say no. When I wasn't pregnant and auditioning, I would just drop what I was doing and focus on that. But now that I have a kid, it's 100% different, just because I have to time everything according to when he's sleeping, or hire a babysitter and make sure that everybody's taken care of so that I can like focus for an hour and do my thing. It's so much harder just because I have to like make sure that my time is, paid attention to somebody else. and then comes me. So that's the hardest part right now.
Yeah, no, totally. And just like so many things going on at the same time. I mean, explain for me a little bit how it works. You're going out, you're auditioning for things. Do you know what's kind of up ahead, or like how do you kind of plan out a year, or is that part of the craziness, is that you don't really know?
You don't plan anything in this industry.
Okay.
I think you're just a minion to whatever happens. There are days when my agent sends me, you have this audition that's due tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And I'm like, and it's 12 pages, and I have a kid, and I haven't slept. And there's just so many factors to take into account. So you definitely are just waiting in the wings in this industry until you're actually the person that has the ability to control what their schedule is. What like Jennifer Lawrence, I know she took a whole year off of of acting, just because she's like, I can do this. And also I want to advocate for the youth, like being able, educating them on the voting rights and all of that stuff. So unless you're in that category of acting, you're kind of just at the beck and call of somebody else that says, when can you work?
And the thing that I find really interesting about that is that the assumption is that actors are rolling in money, they have these huge teams that advocate for them, everything's basically glitter and gold. I don't think I realized or was aware that that maybe wasn't the case until 2014 or 2013 when Sony was hacked, right? And we kind of learned about the discrepancy in pay for Jennifer Lawrence and American Hustle. And she came out and spoke about being paid less. I remember her saying, like, I know this isn't relatable, right? Like, I'm making less millions than other people that are making millions and millions. It's not relatable. But I do think what is relatable, and in this conversation that everyone can identify with, is like feeling like you're kind of getting screwed over, or feeling like you don't know how to advocate for yourself, when to speak up, like what impact that's going to have on your future career, and particularly being a woman, right? So let's get into that. Where do you want to start?
This is my battle with this industry, is because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't say anything. I can fight all I can and want about pay, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody who's their other choice who will do it for literally pennies. And I've been in that scenario so many times because they'd rather just save money as opposed to hire the best person for the job most of the time. I was like the choice for this stupid, probably like trilogy movie of some sort, and it's shot in Thailand. And they ended up hiring a local hire in Thailand and basically could pay her nothing. And then the movie was like a big flop where they should have just said, we made that mistake. But that was the price that they paid. And it sucks because every single time you think you're doing good work as an actor, there's some bullshit reason like that is the cause of you not getting it. Or like other stupid stories is there's one producer in the room and you do such a good job and everybody's like, that's the girl, that's the girl. And this one guy is like, she reminds me of my ex-wife. We can't hire her. Like there's that level of ridiculousness that we have to deal with. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like sometimes you're just not the right person just because somebody doesn't like you. I'm a bitter actor. And I don't think I'm in the position to advocate for my rights just because I am not Julia Roberts. I am not Nicole Kidman. I can't say this is what should happen just because I am a nobody in this big industry full of like, big time A-list players. So for me to speak up, that could tarnish my whole career. I could be blacklisted forever. And so what am I supposed to do? Just sit.
Tell me about that though. So what does that mean, like blacklisted? Have you been in any situations or heard of situations or experienced situations where you do speak up and then you're blacklisted or there's retaliation? Like what does that mean?
Well, okay. Well, oh my God. So one of my first auditions, actually, when I first moved to LA, was for Big Bang Theory. And so I got hired after my last session and I was thrilled. Like this is 3 weeks into me moving to LA. And I go to the table read and Chuck Lorre's there, but he wasn't in any of the audition sessions. And he fired me right after the table read. It was the most awkward feeling ever because I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what the reason was. And then they ended up hiring like a 5'8" blonde
Mm.
in replace of me. And I'm like, you could have prevented all of this if you were just there.
Mm.
And then because of that, the casting director and that office even to this day refuses to see me because it embarrassed them.
Mm.
And I have no reason or I had no idea or like there's no like closure per se with this scenario because all of these things were my fault at the end of it. And my career is reprimanded for it because they were embarrassed.
So let's get into this then. So first of all, when you were told that you were being let go or you're being fired or that you weren't right for the part, like was there any explanation? Was it just like a you can go now or like what?
They're like you're a wrap for the day. but I knew that wasn't like like that wasn't, I wasn't coming back. Like there was no way. Wait, did I get, I don't remember. I don't remember what happened, but all I know is that it sucked and it tarnished my relationship with this one office.
So with that casting office, then they then decided that they were embarrassed.
Yeah, and they refused to see me. So every time I have new representation, agents, managers, I have to preface my meetings with them saying, don't even try submitting me with this office because they will fight you and they will say absolutely not because they don't like me for that one reason. So, I mean, I think maybe I went into that office a couple times, but it was just so, it felt so toxic. Like it felt like they were setting me up for failure. This industry is like, you have to have a backbone like of steel, which I don't. Mine is a overcooked spaghetti noodle. And at times I just, even with now that I have a kid, I'm like, is it even worth it? Is all of this worth it to be, and then like to have that excitement of getting the job and being able to fly off for a few months and do it, and then you get on set and then you're miserable. Like nothing makes you happy in this industry in particular. Like everything that you work hard to and for and you get, once you're there, it's not enough for some people. So you're always like chasing the next best thing. And that's, obviously ego comes into play with all of that stuff too. But everybody that's in the acting world is like, it's Jessalyn, you should really shut up. Like, we shouldn't be talking about this stuff. But I mean, it's hard not to talk about it when everybody else, every one of my other friends in the business talks about it as well. And all we can do is complain to each other about it because we can't say anything. It will hurt our careers.
Well, I'm glad you're speaking about it right now. I think this is the thing, though. This is like we need to speak up about this stuff. And as a viewer, right, like we just don't know any of this, right? Like we're not exposed to any of this. And so I was thinking also about the development and the changes of how we get our content in the first place, right? Like streamers. There's so many streamers. There's so many streaming platforms at the moment. Have you seen that have a direct impact on you and your career, and how does that impact you as an actress?
So not directly, but I know that a lot of times, like nowadays, producers are pitching people off of their social media following. They'll look at who has the most followers because that determines how much viewership they're going to get for their project. And that has nothing to do with talent whatsoever. I feel like we just, as actors, we're just struggling because like I said, it goes back to what people are willing to do for what, at what price. And for me, it's like, well, I value my talent and time as this price, but I know somebody's willing to do it for nothing just for the exposure. So yeah, it has affected us all.
Only 38% of women feel okay negotiating for a salary, but 56% of men are okay doing it. And I think that kind of hits the nail on the head right there, right? Like we aren't empowered as women we don't feel like we're empowered as women to ask for more or to say what we want. What would you say to people that are listening to this that are going through something in their own careers?
I just say, be prepared to, for it to have consequences. You can only control what you say and what you do. As a woman of color, like it just makes it even more difficult just because there's that whole other factor that people take into account. Just be prepared to for it not to go your way.
First of all, I want you to tell me about what you love about this work, right? Like, why do you keep doing it? I think that's also another question that so many of us have. It's like, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? But I like to focus on why you're doing it. What joy does it bring you?
I mean, so specifically with Jenny on Workin' Moms, I get to play this character that is so not me in so many different ways. And so for me to be able to tune into a part of me that is like nasty, like that's what I get excited about that stuff. Like For some reason, I get to play a lot of villains and bitches. That's just my wheelhouse. And I don't get to be that every day. So the fact that I get paid to be a bitch, I thrive on that. And I think it's just so fun because you get to figure out like how far you can take things. And that's why I love it. I mean, every day is different for me. Yeah, I mean, what I love about the whole the acting is just who you get to work with. I mean, if they end up being amazing, it's just like it's just icing on the cake. And you just get to enjoy people's time and that collaboration of like making something great when everybody's like tuned in and they all on a mission to make great work. I think that's like the most perfect scenario.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And what would you say that you hope for the future of your industry? Like what is the direction that you hope that it's going to go in? What do you want to see within your industry?
Like I'm really struggling with being a mom and being in the business right now
Mm-hmm.
just because I see how people are so influenced by all of these people on TV. I don't know. I just have so many hopes as a mom that don't crush society even more than it already has. The kind of content that people are putting out there on their own. This is not like paid, like scripted, whatever. You just see how that affects like teenagers. Yeah, just raising a kid in this society right now is just it's nerve-wracking. So I don't know. I'm just hoping that everybody can like remember to be kind and lead with love in any regard. And I think that has a lot to do with how you're treated on set too. That's a big one because you don't necessarily know what somebody else is going through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that like that really touches on the core of everything just because you really don't know somebody else's story.
I think that is a beautiful note to end things on. I want to let you go. I'm going to wrap up our time. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, we can do this off screen, on screen anytime you want. So
Yay! Yeah, no, thank you. This was awesome. Seriously. What a conversation and what a woman. Jessalyn is amazing. What did you think? Have you been in a situation when you're unsure about whether or not to speak out in your career? Did you become a parent during this pandemic? As always, love to hear from you. Share in the comments below and I'll see you next time.